Colt Patent Firearms was the prototype pistol, which became what we now call the 1911. For World War I, Colt, as well as Springfield Armory, that was a U.S. government function back then, were the major producers making 1911s to meet wartime production. Original 1911 and 1911 A1 pistols are way out of my price range, but I wanted to start this series with modern pistols that at least bear the names of the originals. I want to thank Ann Arbor Arms for their support of Riders Range. Ann Arbor Arms is a 5-star range and training facility with a retail and online store. They can be found at AnnArborArms.com. At least this Colt is somewhat representative of an early 1911 with some significant differences. Most notably, this is a Series 80 design. And you can see that right there. It tells you it's an 80 as opposed to a 70 or earlier design. That's certainly far from the original John Browning design, and oh, by the way, you're going to have to excuse the Colt Cerakote. Certainly isn't original, but when I got this gun, the price was right. Springfield Armory was one of the producers of 1911s for World War I, but it had virtually no production of 1911 A1s for World War II, with Remington, Colt, and Ithaca being the big dogs for that conflict. I will note that Colt, now Colt Manufacturing and Colt Defense, is still a private company in Hartford, Connecticut. However, Springfield Armory World War I was a part of the United States government and located in Springfield, Massachusetts. It, if I remember right, it died somewhere around or was closed down rather, somewhere around 1968. But the Springfield Armory of today is a private company, and it's located in Illinois. Now, despite the fact that Springfield didn't make any 1911 A1 pistols, I selected this particular Springfield as a representation of the A1 because it was the most affordable one in the market at the time, and I wanted this series to start with the two original names. And trying to find a real A1 style pistol these days is pretty difficult. So what are the similarities on, or what actually about the statistics on these? These are both steel frame, 5-inch barrel, 45 caliber pistols. Again, basically true in that respect to the early pistols. The finish on them is a little different, of course. Besides the Cerakote, ignore that for now. The slide on the Colt is a little better polished, although it's matte on top as it's supposed to be. The Springfield, on the other hand, is Parkerized all the way around. So, and again, it's somewhat true to some of the original style guns. The sights on both of these are definitely not GI sights. Both these guns have 3-dot rear and, the 3-dot sight system with the 2 dots in the rear and the post with a white dot in the front. They're a little bit different in profile. You can see the Colt has a slight ramp to the front sight. The Springfield is pretty straight. The rear sight on the Springfield is just a little bit more robust than the rear sight on the Colt. None of those are deal breakers, but they're certainly not original 1911 style. The cocking serrations on the Colt are 90 degrees to the bore axis. They're somewhat angled, almost in line with the front of the grip on the Springfield. Which one is more authentic? I'm thinking the straight lines are, but again, it's these are modern versions, not the old ones. Basic markings on them, they're fairly innocuous. On the Colt, it just says Colt Government Model. On the left side, it again says Colt Government Model 45 caliber. The Springfield just has the Springfield logo, and you can just barely see it on the right. In fact, I can't really see it in this light on the right at all. On the left, it just says Mil-Spec. Get a little better shot of it there. Yeah. The injection ports are just a little bit different, and here's where the Colt is a little more true to the 1911 style. It's not lowered and it's not flared. It's your basic original 1911 style configuration, whereas on the Springfield it's lowered just a little bit, and it is a little bit flared on the ejection port, which is supposed to help with ejection. And again, I found both of these guns run completely reliable either way, so I'm not sure that's a deal breaker. And both of these have the standard metal full or partial length guy rod. Steel frames on both of them. The magwell on the Colt is just a straight cut magwell, whereas the magwell on the Springfield has just a slight flare to it. I haven't had any problem inserting magazines quickly in either one, but I imagine there's a slight advantage to having that flare. Hammers on both are a similar profile. The hammer on the on the Springfield is just a hair wider than the Colt, but excuse me, narrower than the Colt, but not much. Profiles are the same. The grip safety is probably where the bigger difference is on this. The grip safety on the Colt is it's the smaller typical 1911 type, whereas the grip safety on the Springfield is just a little bit bigger, and that has a tendency on the Colt to cause hammer bite, and I'm not a fan of hammer bites. That's why when you see me shooting the Colt, I'm shooting it with gloves on. On the front strap, they're both plain, no checkering at all. Back straps are the mainspring housing on both of these. There's striations on them. And here's where again we get a little more into the typical 1911 versus A1 style. The mainspring housing on the Colt is flat. Mainspring housing on the Springfield is slightly rounded, as is typical of the 1911 A1. Thumb safeties are definitely not original. They're a little bit larger on this. This would be considered more the modern type of thumb safety. Definitely not what you find on original, even some of the other Colts I've got that are more modern. And I will also note that the frame is relieved behind the trigger guard on both of these guns, and again that's more in keeping with the A1 style than it is the 1911. And speaking of trigger, the trigger on the Colt, by the way, these guns have been safety checked, and they no magazines and nothing in the chamber. Trigger on the Colt has just the slightest amount of take up and a nice clean break and virtually no over travel, like the trigger on the Colt. Again, you can see the Springfield is empty, nothing in it. It's the short trigger. The Colt's got a medium length trigger, which is typical of the 1911. The 1911 A1 had the shorter trigger, and you can see that on the Springfield here. It definitely has quite a bit of take up in the trigger. A little bit of creep right there before it finally gets to a break, and again almost no over travel. But the take up and the creep in that trigger is just not what I like. However, both of these break at 4.5 pounds consistently, and I don't think the trigger is a factor in how well they shoot. The Colt comes with, at least this model Colt comes with rubber factory grips. It's got the Colt logo on them. Depending on the model you get different grips with the modern ones. They're certainly not true to the original with the double diamond wood grips on them. The Springfield has Coca-Cola double diamond wood grips, and again this is their basic mil-spec model, although technically the A1, if I remember right, went to phenolic grips or plastic grips at some point. And what about weight? And again, I test all of these with 8 rounds of ammunition, which is 7 rounds of the magazine, 1 round in the 1 round for the chamber. The guns are pretty similar in weight, although the Springfield is just a little heavier than the Colt. The Colt comes in at 43.1 ounces, or 2 pounds, 11.1 ounces. Springfield is about a little more than 2 ounces heavier, comes in at 2 pounds, 13.3 ounces, or 45.3 ounces total. Now, I don't generally bench rest my guns for accuracy unless the gun is specifically intended for precision shooting. I do all of my shooting offhand, so that's how I test. So you aren't going to see these super tight groups from me, but you know, if they can hold 3 inches at 15 yards, I'm offhand, I'm okay with that. Also, different guns may prefer different ammunition, and I test what I have on hand, which is usually just run-of-the-mill major brand ammo. In this case, I was using 230 grain Remington, and I use the same ammunition for each gun in a comparison test. At 15 yards, the Colt does not seem to shoot quite as tight as I would expect, but again, that could be ammo related. The sights are right on, though, for 230 grain ball ammunition. The Springfield shoots a little to the left, but the groups seem to be better than the Colt. Now, there's an alignment mark. You can just barely see it there on the slide, right in front of the sight. That is supposed to be centered on the sight. In this case, it's just a hair to the sight notch is just a hair to the left of the alignment mark. So that's one that slipped past Springfield quality control. So if I nudge that rear sight to the right just a little bit in its dovetail, I'm sure that would bring them right back on. You know, they each worked okay at 50 yards, though. They were hitting the IDPA's torso at 50 yards. At least when I did my part, they were hitting 12-inch plates, even 10-inch plates, as long as I had the sights and the trigger going correctly at the same time. But I wouldn't consider either one of these for regular shooting at that distance. But you know, for me, it's more a product of the type of the sights than it is the accuracy of the gun. Now, the visual ratio between the front blade and the rear notch on these, they're about the same. It does allow for a good lateral alignment, but I just always found that the 3-dot sight arrangement is distracting. I mean, it's okay for a quick sight picture, but for me, it's distracting for precision alignment. Now, what about price on these? The manufacturer suggested price for your basic Series 80 government model Colt is $799. If you want a Series 70, you're going to pay $100 more for that. If you want what they call the Classic, both that and the Series 70 are going to be a manufacturer's price of $899. You can find the Colts on the street for $750, give or take. Used, an 80 series is going to run anywhere from $650 to about $900, depending on where you find it and what it is. The 70 series is going to run anywhere from $800 to an early 70 series in good condition will set you back probably more than $2,000. Springfield, on the other hand, the manufacturer's suggested price for this Mil-Spec is pretty close to the Colt at $780. Street price on the Springfield, though, is a little bit less at $500 plus or minus. And I think they just had an ad running the Springfield at some special that was ridiculously low. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a really good price for that. Used prices on the Springfield are going to be a little less than the Colt. They're going to run right around $550, give or take. So my comparison on these is subjective. Now, the Springfield is closer to the 1911 A1 design. The Colt, regardless of which model you get, has a mixture of the old 1911 design and the more modern A1 features. The Colt has a little bit of side-to-side play between the frame and the slide, but the barrel lockup's good. Now, the Springfield just seems tighter to me. However, the ejector to slide fit on the Colt is much better. And it's definitely almost a flush fit on the Colt, whereas on the Springfield, the ejector, or extractor rather, not the ejector, definitely sticks out from the frame. It's not quite as well finished there. It's one of those attention to detail things that Colt got just a little bit better on this one than the Springfield, but it could be just particular samples like that. Now, they're each relatively accurate at normal distances. They run 100% no matter what I put through them, and I've put everything through them, even reloads, and had no problem with either gun. Doesn't matter what magazine I'm running. The Colt medium trigger is definitely the better of the two in my opinion, and while the Springfield has an alignment mark for the rear sight, their quality control definitely missed out on that one. Of course, the hammer bite on the Colt is a non-starter, and I really don't like plain 3-dot sights on either gun, or any gun for that matter. So for a rider's range conclusion, the Springfield feels tighter, seems to shoot better groups, and doesn't give me hammer bite, but it weighs a hair more than the Colt, and the trigger on my gun isn't as nice as the Colt, and I personally don't like short triggers, though it may very well be better suited for small hands. And with the exception of the sights, it is relatively true to the A1 style. The Colt seems to have the better trigger, so the difference could be just the particular guns that I have here, not necessarily representative of all Colts or Springfields. Some folks hate the Series 80 design, but that's not a deal breaker for me. It works. And again, the triggers are the trigger on the Colt with the 80s design is just a little bit better than the Springfield. In some ways, the fit and finish on the Colt seems a little better than the Springfield, but the slide to frame fit isn't anywhere near as tight as the Springfield, or almost any of my other 1911s. Even my $400 Rock Island guns have better slide to frame fit than any of my Colts. Of course, there's the Colt name, though that comes at a price, at least when you look at street prices or pre-owned prices. But the hammer bite on the Colt, well, that just means I have to wear gloves when I shoot it. So which one does rider's range pick? Well, we could go either way, so we aren't going to make a call on this one. It's kind of like which four-door sedan do you like best, the Ford or the Chevy. They're good examples of basic appliances for both, so it depends on personal taste. For the price, either one is good. It's a good basic 1911. But we have many more guns to test and compare, so I think there may be better guns out there for the money. Stay tuned for the next Rider's Range video. We'll be comparing the Ruger SR 1911 with the Smith & Wesson E-Series, and we got many more comparison videos to come in the 1911 series. If you want to be notified when the next video comes out, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to get those notifications. And by all means, if you like this video, please like, please subscribe, and thank you for visiting Riders Range.